Rewind 30 odd years. A little girl with a loving small nuclear family living in a small apartment in a very beautiful coastal city. The dawn stimulates all her senses. The sight of intricate, bright white columns against the dampened, dark brown. The smell of filter coffee and agarbattis fighting their way to her nostrils and waking up every neuron in her brain. The Suprabhatam from the Balaji temple and a booming voice praising Karumariamman from a very small temple at the end of her street fills her ears. The humid breeze from the beach nearby wakes her up and she opens her eyes fresh as a flower and has a chirpy start to her day. The milk vendor Abdullah Tata, the auto driver Kasi uncle, the priest at the temple Mani Mama, the neighbor Rose auntie, the vegetable vendor Shakuntala Party, the flower vendor Manjula Akka, the maid Lata auntie, everyone greets this little girl as if she was their own, as she enthusiastically starts her day in this large city which she calls her home, with a large family of 10 million people who she addresses as brother, sister, aunt, uncle, and more based on their age. This was my childhood. Today's episode on Indic Echoes is very special. It is about something that is very close to my heart, my hometown, Chennai. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Mr. V. Sriram, an entrepreneur, historian, heritage activist, and Carnatic music enthusiast, to talk to us about the history of this very intriguing and unique city, Chennai. Sriram is a pioneer of the concept of heritage walks in Chennai and also in other parts of India. His talks on the history of Chennai and Carnatic music are some of my all time favorites. In fact, it is one of his talks on Andal that inspired us to come up with a special video on this amazing saint and poet of the 11th century. Welcome to Indic Echoes, Mr. Sriram. I am beyond excited to have this conversation with you. Let's start with something interesting. So, how would you explain Chennai or introduce Chennai to someone who's absolutely new to the city?
Chennai is a city that is progressive and at the same time takes care that its culture travels along as it moves forward. That is Chennai.
Wow. So, having traveled to and lived in many cities around the world, one thing I find very unique about Chennai is the way the city buzzes early in the morning, be it women decorating the streets with kolam, or even the fishing communities setting out into the sea for their duties, or the idli stalls steaming with hot idlis and sambars at 5 a.m. Do you think this is unique to Chennai, or what other things do you think set Chennai apart from other cities in the world?
No, it's you've asked me specifically about waking up early in the morning. I would say that it's a very Tamil tradition, I would say, because I think in Tamil Nadu, in most towns, you will find that people are up very, very early in the morning. And more so, Chennai being a coastal city, I would say that it gets up that much earlier because the sun comes in that much earlier in the morning over here. So that, I would say, is principally the reason why we do make a big deal about getting up early in the morning. All of us, I mean, when I say all of us, I would say, of course, there are lots of people who do get up later, but it is a part of Chennai's tradition that you wake up early. That's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that you said it's a Tamil tradition. Can you tell us a little more about it? Why is it so special here? I mean, why Tamil tradition? Because typically we all do the same thing. Why and where did it start?
I don't know about whether, if you look at Andal's Tirupavai, for instance, she extols this thing about getting up early in the morning and coming over and worshipping the Lord. She says that, look, the sun is already going to come up in the sky. The saintly personality associated with the temple is wearing his ochre clothes and he is now going towards worship. Why are you still sleeping? Of course, they say that it is an address to the mind, which is ignorant, and she is waking it up. But in a very broad sense, it is also an awakening of a sleeping person. Similarly, in Manikavachakar's Tiruvachakam also, you have in the Tirupalli Ezhi as well as in the Tiruvembave, there is the waking up and waking up early. Similarly, Shankara in his Shivaparadha Kshamapana Stotram, he says, Snatva Pratyushakale, having had my bath early in the morning. So there is a lot of, I think it's part of our lives that we make the maximum out of the day. And perhaps they all lived in a time when, there was obviously no electricity, and maybe the day ended early because this is on the East Coast again. So the sun sets earlier than what it does on the West Coast. And so perhaps they were trying to make the maximum out of whatever daylight there was. And so the day began that much early in the morning.
Wow. So I know this is a very commonly asked and it's a much talked about and vetted question, but I still have to ask you this question as a custom, because especially for children who do not know and who are watching this show, what is the etymology of Madras and Chennai? Which came first?
I have no idea about either, and nobody has any idea, though everybody comes up with their own fancy stories. When the English came here in 1639, they signed a grant with the Nayak of Vandavasi, and in that it very clearly says our town of Madras Patnam. The Nayak is saying that. So obviously there existed a town called Madras Patnam, or a village for that matter, and thereafter he gives it to the British, and that really takes on the so it's a pre-existing name. Similarly, if you look at the word Chennapatnam, which appears to have come along with the arrival of the British, there is a theory that the Nayak's father was a Chennappa Nayaka. This again is disputed by historians. They say that in that lineage there was never a Chennappa Nayaka. So we assume that it was named after him, and therefore it becomes Chennappa Nayak and Patnam, which therefore becomes Chennapatnam, and then it becomes Chennai later. But if both the stories are correct, Chennappa Nayaka would have been a Telugu-speaking man, so it's not a Tamil word. So today, when we claim that we have named it as Chennai because it is Tamil, we are incorrect there. And we don't know if Madras was an English name or an Indian name at this stage, but if it existed prior to the coming of the British, which is what it would seem to be from the land, from the grant, then it would appear that it was a pre-existing name, in which case it could have been Tamil, it could have been Telugu as well. We don't know about that. And there is now a claim that in the 14th century, there is a stone inscription somewhere near Krishnagiri, which lists the villages which today form some parts of Madras. So we have Neelangarai, we have Kovalam, and then it also says Madarasan Patnam. So Madarasa Patnam may have been a name from the 13th or the 14th century also. Later, we've had a lot of fanciful stories, and now you have people who very firmly believe in one or the other. This is an era of posturing. So, you have a lot of people claiming that their theory is the correct theory and everything else is bull. But we have to say that nobody has a clear answer. That is how I would put it.
Wow. Okay, that kind of revealed something to me today. So I don't know now if I should call myself a Madras girl or a Chennai girl, but either is okay. So you mentioned about multiple villages like Neelangarai and Kovalam and all that. So we know there are stories behind the names of locality. There's two parts to this question. One is it true that the whole area that we today call as Chennai was a bunch of villages? And second is, can you tell us a little bit about some of the names and some of the interesting stories behind them? Because I grew up in Mandavili, and I was told that it was because that a lot of cattle was herd there that it was called Mandai Valley. Mandai meaning cattle and Valley is field. So can you tell us a little more about that?
Yes, it was a collection of villages, and among them there must have been a very minor village called Madras Patnam or Chennapatnam, because unfortunately before the coming of the British, we don't hear of any documentation of these two villages. So if at all they existed, they must have been very, very small hamlets. Like that, we have a number of others, like for instance, Alvarpet or Royapeta, or these are all villages of which we know nothing. They must have been probably one street or two street settlements which later got amalgamated into the city. But there are some very ancient villages that far predate the arrival of the English, which is why when we say that a city was founded in 1639, many of us don't agree with that theory, because we say that the concept of closely linked villages existed even prior to that. You can't say that they created something out of the blue. This is not like New Delhi. So in New Delhi, a proper foundation stone being laid in 1911, saying that this will be a capital. And even there, you can't say it, because New Delhi is, after all, located on several older Delhis. So you can't. So yes, but you do agree that New Delhi was created by the British in 1911. Now, you can't say the same thing about Chennai or Madras, particularly if the village existed even in the 13th or the 14th century. But we have towns like villages like Mylapore or Tiruvattriyur or Tirallikeni, Tirunirmalai, Tiruvanmiyur. These are all hallowed in poetry from the 6th century onwards. So we hear of the great Alvars, the great Nayanmars coming here and singing in praise of the temples that existed in this region. And when they come, they are describing what are very clearly well-established villages. So when Samandar comes here, for instance, to Mylapore, he says, Mattitta Punnayin Kanal, Madamailai, Kattittam Kundan, Kapalicharam Amardan, Ottitta Panbin, Uruttira Palganatharku, Attittal Kanade, Podio Pumpavai, which basically means in this fragrant grove of Punnai trees, Mada Mailai. Mada means beautiful. So in this beautiful Mailai, Kattittam Kondan, he took a house, this Kapali, and he stayed here. That is, he's talking about Shiva. Ottitta Panbin, Uruttira Palganatharku. So the Rudra Ganas, the followers of Shiva, they are coming here and they are staying here. And the noble women of Mylapore are Attittal, they are offering them food. You are not seeing this, O Pumpavai. He is addressing this maiden called Pumpavai, who is not there. That legend is a separate story. And so he is talking about how beautiful this Mylapore is. And then there are 10 stanzas which describe 10 festivals of the year. Those festivals are followed even today in this particular story. So therefore, we know that even in his time, there was a very well-established shrine over here. But if you look at a temple like Tiruvattriyur, it predates the Nayanmars. So while in Kapalishwarar Kovil, we know that it was from the time of the Nayanmars that we have poetry. In the case of Tiruvattriyur, we have much older evidences and records. And then, of course, we know that the sanctum as it exists today was built by Rajendra Chola sometime in the 11th century. And so these are all temples and villages. So when you look at Mylapore, today we say that the goddess came in the form of a peacock and worshipped there. But none of the Tevaram poetry really mentioned this legend. And I don't know, because they don't even mention the presence of a goddess called Karpagamba. So if you say that as a fact today, there are people who get offended. But then history is one thing and legend is yet another. So if we accept Gnanasamanda's poem as fact, we also have to accept as fact that he does not mention a goddess. He, of course, never mentions a goddess even in other locations. And till the arrival of the Pandyas, it was not customary to have a Shiva temple and a Parvati temple together. So they would be a separate individual shrines. So this legend, even Appar, when he talks about Mylapore, and he was a contemporary of Samandar, he does not say Mylapore, he says Mylapil. Now, what does that mean? That means a grove where the cawing of the peacock is heard. So it is a place where it was a peacock grove, essentially. Later, we incorporate the legend and we say the goddess worshipped here in the form of a peacock. I always wonder why, because if she was a woman, she would worship in the form of a peahen and not as a peacock. So there is something there. But in Tiruvattriyur, you have a very clear establishment of why the name, because it was considered to be so holy by the Cholas that they eliminated from paying taxes. So, Ottri Vaikapata Ur, that is, it was removed from the taxation.
Oh,
Therefore, it
Thiru.
becomes Thiru Ottriyu.
Okay.
And the Lord there is Adi Purishwarar, Adi, the fourth Dha, which basically means exempt or to be wiped out or to be kept separate from. That over a period of time becomes Adi, the third Da, and today we claim that that is the oldest village in existence in the whole world. So the Shiva here is Adi Purishwara. So there's a very scientific reason the name. Later it becomes a part of legend. Thiruvallikeni, because there was a beautiful tank of lilies over there. Tirunirmalai, even today, is surrounded by water. So you believe in that, in the Pallikaranai marsh is all around Tirunirmalai. So in that time, there must have been a lot more water. So when the hill suddenly comes out of water, people would have definitely called it Tirunirmalai. So there are reasons why places are named. But there are many others where we have no understanding. For instance, why Nungambakam, why Kodambakam, why Adayar. Adayar, of course, the river. But then the point is that we have really no idea. So why Chetpet? Or these are all places where we have no records of their names. And all these stories that keep circulating, they are all fake. The one or two villages that were created by the English, like Chindadripet, is Chinnatharipettai, which basically means the town, the small village of weavers. So they created a village of weavers and they named it Chinnatharipettai, which over a period of time became Chindadripet. So we do have a few villages, even in the latter medieval era, where we recognize the reason for their names, but not in most cases.
Oh, wow. So to all children and parents watching this show, I challenge you to go check out some of your own neighborhoods and the place that you are in and find the story behind them, and enrich yourselves with amazing stories just like the ones that our guest of the show today said. So Sriram, coming back, you told about the villages. What is something that's always intrigued me is pre-Britishers. We don't hear of Chennai or Madras as a big or an important city at all. Tanjavur was the cultural hub. We hear about Nagapattinam, which was the harbor. Why was it, and at what point did Chennai get its significance as a metropolis and an important city?
I mentioned it to you right in the beginning. Chennai must have been a very unimportant village that did not merit mentioning. It did not have a massive temple. So it must have, as I said earlier, there are other villages like Alvarpet, Roypeta, etc., about which we know nothing. Tenampete, for that matter, which are all pre-existing villages, but with hardly any historic record. So that is very true. I mean, today there are several localities that become a part of the city over a period of time. And then we don't go back and find out what was it before it became a part of the city. So there are only some places where we do know of their history and their culture, the past and all that. So we have to accept it. There is no point in saying that this was massive or this was great. We have to say that there are no records, and that's about it. So it's only with the coming of the English in 1639 that this city really begins transforming itself into a metropolis. And thereafter, it becomes the capital of a vast Madras presidency, which extended from Orissa right down to Kanyakumari. And then in the 1930s, Orissa was carved out as a separate province. And Madras presidency stretched from Andhra to Kanyakumari. Then immediately after independence, it became the state of Madras. And it remained like that till 1953, when Andhra was carved out of it as a separate state. And then this became the state of Madras. Then in 1968, it was renamed. 1969, it was renamed and it became Tamil Nadu, the state. And if you look at the position of Madras or Chennai, you will realize that it is in the northernmost tip of Tamil Nadu. It's a very unusual location for a capital city. That is because it was in the center of the old Madras presidency. If you take your compass and draw an arc from Kanyakumari right up to Orissa, you will find that Madras is more or less in the center of that arc. Whereas when all those northern parts kept going away and this still remained the biggest city, that remained with Tamil Nadu, and it is in a very awkward position, I would say, right up north at the extreme tip of the state. If you move a few kilometers north of Chennai, you're in Andhra. So that is how it is.
Oh, wow. Okay, that actually kind of answers or makes me realize why probably the kings of the past had their capital in Tanjavur, which was more central to the
Or
region
Madurai,
that
for
they.
that matter, or Tiruchirappalli. These were all
Correct.
central locations. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay, let's move to a bit of comparison. A healthy comparison. I've traveled to Netherlands, and one of the cities that constantly remind me of Chennai is Amsterdam. And I'm not able to explain why. Maybe it's the feeling that I get when I travel there. But whenever I visit there, I've always felt, oh, not just Amsterdam, any European country, it has this old town where it's very pedestrian friendly, and then you have these nice rivers where you can actually, it's used for commuting even today. And I always used to wonder, what it would be like if we were to take some good things from there and make Chennai like that, like let's say make all these heritage centers like Mylapore or Tiruvallikeni as just pedestrian only spots. And if we are able to revive and bring back Kuvam and Adayaru, I just want you to maybe try and paint a picture. I know you're a great storyteller. Can you paint a picture for our children as to how Chennai would look if we are to do something like that, or how it would have looked when those rivers were actually functioning?
I keep wondering because, first of all, we cannot compare a European town with an Indian town because of the very history from which we come. So on one hand, you have an exploitative continent, and the other hand, you have an exploited subcontinent. So there is a lot of difference. One thing, it's very easy to steal in huge quantity from a subcontinent and then feather a nation. And in a very crucial 300 years, when all the infrastructure is established by money from the colonies, which is true of Netherlands, which is true of England, which is true of France, everywhere. Most of their economies were subsidized by the colonies that they lorded over. And the other side was that, this was a country that was being bled and everything was being taken away. So that is one thing. The other is that there is a huge population difference and there is a massive economic divide. Today, the population of the Netherlands could probably come compressed into the population of a city like Chennai and a few other cities put together. What happens then to all the difficulties of supporting the rest? So one thing is, I would say that I wouldn't want to paint a picture for children of a pedestrianized locality where it is like a European quarter, because it's a very elitist vision of the state, of a city. A city like Chennai, or for that matter, any Indian city, is full of the rich, the middle class, and the poor. And the poor really form the bulk of what we see in public spaces, in areas of heritage, like say a Mylapore or a Tiruvallikeni or whatever. And wholesale pedestrianization and then creating, boutique shops, etc., will just displace all these people from their traditional sources of employment. So an Indian town is very differently constructed from a European town. So here, a part of our heritage is the flower seller, all those people whom you mentioned in your introduction. Where will all that, that auntie and everybody else go if we were to make it just for the tourist? They will have no existence whatsoever. So any idea of creating a heritage quarter will have to involve all the people who have traditionally remained in that particular locality.
Right, I agree. So when I said pedestrian friendly, all I meant was preserving the heritage. So, for example, today when I walk the streets of Tiruvalikini or Mylapore, one of the things that bothers me is the fact that there are so many cars and bikes there, which can potentially even be parked maybe 2 streets away, and
Where?
get people
Where is
only.
the space 2 streets away? Can you
Of
name it?
course, the city, the city
Yeah,
needs.
then it involves displacing the slum dweller who is on the bank of the Buckingham Canal. Where is the open space? India is a problem of human population of huge numbers, and we have to accommodate everybody. Any solution that comes up with, even in a heritage locality, will have to take into account all these stakeholders. Yes, it is very easy to say that you can ban the cars and ban the scooters and ban the two-wheelers, but it is also a residential locality.
That's right.
What happens to all the people who are continuing to live over there? Where will they go with their vehicles? What happens in the event of a medical emergency? How do they manage to get out if they don't have their cars or whatever it is, or their scooters or two-wheelers? So my guess is that we can only coexist and preserve what exists at this point of time. We cannot drastically transform anything into something else. But yes, you did talk about the rivers. There is no excuse for keeping the rivers the way they are. And that, in my opinion, there is a huge potential for transformation of the water bodies. So that is entirely in the hands of the people and the government, that is also of the people in any case. And that really requires a very major transformation in terms of plugging all the effluent outlets, all the drains that completely get into the rivers, all the waste that is continuously making its way into the Kuvam and the Adyar for that matter. And it's not just plastic waste and rubbish, it's also a lot of chemical waste from industrial establishments, from thermal power plants. So there are several things that happen along the way. So it requires a lot of political will to do that. But the question is, when was the Kuvam last clean? If you ask me this question, I would say that it was probably last clean in the 1700s. After that, it has. So there, lots of these people will come along and tell you, oh, in the British times, the Kuvam was very clean. There are lots of records in British times to show that the Kuvam was not clean. It was very dirty. Even during the time of the British, it has only become more dirty during our time. So it is this very Indian mindset to degrade the environment. Let us be very frank about it. Wherever we see a water body, we don't think twice about throwing plastic waste or building debris all around it. And then in the dry season, when there is no water, building housing colonies on top of it. So a lot of this needs to be arrested. And, there are activists who are fighting for all that at this point of time. Hopefully, the only way to go about it is to build awareness in the school children. Because I think parents are a lost generation, in my opinion. It's the school children who, with their fresh innocence, if the schools begin talking about the reason for environmental hygiene and for respecting what natural resources we have, when they grow up, they then carry that sense and they then fight for what is there. So that, I would say, would really be the big thing. Children need to be made aware of what colossal messes we have in terms of our rivers and what potential they have to be improved and to be made better for the future.
Wow, brilliant. And thank you so much for painting a realistic picture for me, because, I, like many people around me, friends, family, I'm definitely one of those who would always is fancy this, oh, we can do this, we can do that, make this pedestrian friendly, as I just said. And I never thought or realized the repercussions. In just 2 sentences, you just made me realize that, we'll have to look at it from multiple angles, and it's just not that easy to make it happen. So
I also learned it the very hard way. I have made several mistakes, and I then realized that it is very nice. It's very easy for a person like me to sit and say from the comfort of my armchair that, I should do this or I should. Then I realized that it's a very tough job. It's just that my only desire would be that I wish that the government in its transformation is more participative. So the concept of public consultation, of telling people that this is the change that we are going to bring about in this locality. This is how it will improve your lives, or this is how it will negatively affect your lives. That aspect is so missing. And that, if it was there, would make these changes far more acceptable and easy.
Sure, sure. Thank you so much for that. And let's move a little to the language of the city, Chennai. Chennai has a very interesting dialect, if I may say, the Madras Bhasha. And I know you're now doing a series of tweets on the Madras Bhasha. I read most of them, if not all, and especially liked the Krishna oil and the humor behind that. So, can you tell us a little more about the quote unquote Chennai Bhasha?
Okay, so like any cosmopolitan city, see, one thing is that if you ask people from Bombay, they'll say that Bombay is a very cosmopolitan city. There is no denying it. Today, Bangalore definitely takes on that mantle as well. But historically, which is a non-cosmopolitan city, you always have people from various communities, various languages, because wherever there is economic opportunity, people migrate towards those places. And Chennai has offered that for a long period of time. As a consequence, you find that there are Telugu-speaking people, Tamil-speaking people, Kannada, Malayalis. If you look at, and Tulu, so you have had all these people coming here and settling, and Gujaratis for that matter, Marwadis. They have all been here for 300 years. Gujaratis have been here for 300 years. Marwadis have been here for 300 years. Then in addition to that, you've had the Nawab of Arcot bringing his Urdu and Persian-speaking people. The Portuguese were here, the Dutch were here, the British were here, and you also had the French for brief periods of time. So as a consequence, there are almost 8 or 9 languages that have jostled for space. Then you add Sanskrit, because you have a very strong learning element of Sanskrit and hymnodists and all that. So you have almost 10 languages jostling for space. And you have this foundation of Tamil, which is really the majority language, so to speak. And people have all created a medium of communication by adding words which they like or which they feel expresses the sentiment more easily. So that is how it is. The other point is that if you look at even Hyderabad for that matter, the Hyderabadi Hindi is so bad that you are quite, you're taken aback with it, but then that is their form of communication.
Correct.
The Bombay Hindi is also not a great Hindi. The Delhi Hindi is so Punjabi in its influence that there again, it is a strange amalgam. Very strangely, Calcutta, though it's a cosmopolitan city, has retained the Bengali as it is. And there are only 2 kinds of Bengalis. There is the Bengali, which is spoken in East Bengal, and then there is the Bengali that is spoken in West Bengal. So there is a big difference between the two. And you can easily identify a person from the kind of Bengali that he is speaking. But there are only 2 versions. So you don't have the kind of mix, the rich mix that we have in Tamil. Tamil is, the Madras Bhasha is very unique that way, because it's got around 10 languages contributing to it in a big way. And also in a commercial city as opposed to a royal city or a traditional city, the speed of communication is very high. So people tend to talk fast, and because they need to get going, time is money. So you find that they speak very, very quickly, and they establish words as they go along, which is why this is a very, it also traces our history. And sometimes when people say that, it's what about the purity of the language? Let's accept that this is also a language, and this has got its own grammar, this has got its own vocabulary. Then we should not discriminate between one and the other. This has managed. This is keeping on adding words to itself over the past 300 years. And if you look at the correspondences of the 18th and the 19th century, you find that the Tamil had a lot of what we would call Madras Bhasha.
Okay.
Even then. So it existed. So the words they were using at that time are words that we are also using. We have added to it. So it just reflects the way the city grew. Some things are very funny in that, some are not so funny. So as time goes along, I would always say that we should look back on history with a gentle sense of humor. That way, there'll be no riots, no misunderstandings, no accusing each other. We have to accept history as it happened, and we have also got to look at it with a mild sense of humor. You'll find that you're all forgiving and you're happy to go along to the future. So that would be my formula.
Very beautifully said. So it's not only about looking at the past and the present, it's also about appreciating the evolution.
Exactly. I find that people take it very seriously, then they fight. Why? You're not going to change it just by shouting and yelling. You're not going to bring back a building that was lost or somebody who died in some horrible fashion 300 years ago. At least we should prevent such things from happening in future. But by fighting, we are only creating a situation where those things can happen again. So this is my view.
Can you tell us a few words from Madras Bhasha and the some funny story, especially the Krishna oil? I really did want you to talk about the Krishna oil.
So kerosene oil came in the early.
So we're just going to take a small break and do a rapid fire. Your favorite beach? So this is a tricky one. Your favorite Sabha canteen? So what is a common complaint that you've heard about Chennaites? How important do you think that these people also learn about the history of this art form?
Not really necessary, in my opinion.